right, we are here at my Vermihut indoor worm bin, and today we're gonna explore the different levels of this bin. This top bin is also known as the sterile tray. It's gonna get fed later today, but it is 32 days old, and there have been 4 feedings in it so far. So you can see what a month-old 4 feeding bin looks like. I'm not going to dig in too deep to find worms because we'll be feeding later and we'll be able to see that on a different video. So take a look, freeze that in your mind, and what we're going to do is lift this up and see what the second layer looks like. Now the second layer, I didn't let it go till I just saw most of the castings. It still had some cardboard shreds and some bedding in it and a little bit of food. So we'll see how they've done with that. So without further ado, we will take this tray off. All right, so now we are at the middle tray, and you can already see some worms that were just on the surface, or maybe they were going up from the bottom. And I don't know if you can see, but you can see the crosshatch of the holes that are in each of these trays so that the worms can go up and down freely. So I would expect that the majority of the worms were in that first tray, and then there's some in here. The whole system was started with 2,000 worms over 200 days ago, probably closer to 250 days ago. So I would assume that they have multiplied and that kind of thing. But let's go ahead and dig in. Now this particular tray was started, oh wow, yeah, you can see them. There's still a lot of worms in here. This particular tray was started 127 days ago, and we fed it 10 times, and it spent 95 of those 127 days as the top tray before we decided to put that next tray on. These are some fat worms in here too, for what kind they are. We've got some blues and we've got some red wigglers. So the blue worms typically are moving around faster, and their clitellum is kind of flat with their body, whereas the red wigglers a little bit bigger, and their clitellum is a little bit more bulgy, and they don't wiggle around so fast. So those all look like blues. But I will come in here occasionally and aerate down here and just kind of check the moisture levels and stuff. And there is still some bedding. This looks like the skin of a pepper, that kind of thing. And still a lot of worms down here. So if I were to try and get castings out of this, then I would have to bait and maybe even, you know, sift and separate the worms out, or do the method where you put a bright light on them and they go down deeper, and then you take the layer off and then they go down deeper, and you keep doing that until you just have a mess of worms. This right here, I want to show you something. This is really cool. So this is a mating pair, and right now they are attached at their clitellums. So what happens is they will deposit sperm, one into the female parts of the other, and the other one drops its sperm in the female parts of the other. So they each have both male and female. And then they will separate, and the cocoon is actually formed over the top of the clitellum, and they kind of wiggle out of the cocoon, and then they pop out. But hopefully you can see that there's a little bit of dirt. I don't really want to disturb them because I want them to make their cocoon, but I'm not sure if these are blue worms or red wigglers, but that right there, this is one worm, and then this is another. This end is attached to this end right here, and this end is attached to the little wiggly end right there that you can see, but that right there is a mating pair. And I am so sorry to disturb you all, but perhaps this is the mating chamber. I don't think I've seen that in my top bin. Just interesting how many are, you know, in here for this being a bin that hasn't been fed. And this does feel moister than the top layer. It is by no means wet, and you can see that it's very crumbly, so that is a good thing. But this is the middle bin, so I'm just gonna kind of aerate the rest. Try not to bother that mating pair too much. Just kind of aerate the rest, and then we will go down into the bottom bin. But look at that, look at it's almost like a worm ball, even though there's no food to attract them. They are just absolutely all throughout this. So, you know, 127 days of being a bin or a tray. I call these trays, but they're kind of their own bin all at the same time. So that's probably good enough. And then, you know, when you're gonna put another bin on top, when I'm aerating or when I'm starting a new tray, you wanna make sure that this is even. That way the next tray sits on top of it even. This is a piece of wood, which I'm gonna put in the top tray. It's not going to get decomposed or turned into castings anytime soon in here. So I'll do my best to kind of even this out. And now what we're gonna do is we're going to lift this one off, and we're gonna look at the bottom tray. The bottom tray should not have any pieces of bedding or food, that kind of thing. It should be pretty much mostly castings. Impossible to get 100% pure castings. You don't know if there's a bit in there that hasn't been through a worm. So if you see anything that says 100% pure castings, how are they gonna verify that each little particle's been through a worm? So, all right, here we go. We're gonna lift this tray out, and now we're gonna go on to the bottom tray. All right, so here we are. We are at the bottommost tray, and you can see that there are still worms in here. This tray was started 197 days ago. It had 9 feedings, and it spent 70 of those 197 days at the top. So it's been basically underground for 127 days. So, you know, if you get one of these tower systems, I don't want you to think that, oh, all the worms are gonna go all the way to the top, and then it's just gonna be all the vermicompost and castings down here. That is not the case. In fact, we're gonna dig down here, and I think you'll see that there'll be worms in here. Now this is moister than that middle level that we were in, and I'm hoping that we see less worms up here, which I don't know. I don't know if there's less, but as you can see, this is, you know, these worm towers are not, you know, entirely effective at getting your worms all in one bin and then just harvesting the lower one. You are going to have to bait. So, you know, the end of this video is not the end of this bin. I'm going to take it off the system and then, you know, leave it out without a lid and let this dry out a little bit. And at the same time, I'll probably put something in the middle to bait them out. But this is moisture. It's still, you know, flaky and comes apart very easy. But as you can see, I mean, there's just so many worms in here still. So, you know, something I could do, and I may do if I think about it and have enough time, is, you know, try and just pull some of these worms out, just to kind of get the majority of them. And I'll just throw them right back into the top layer. But this is definitely going to take some baiting. And then, of course, there are definitely cocoons in here because, you know, anytime you got more than one worm, you're going to have some mating. And I think this might be a cocoon, but it's probably too small to tell. So, you know, then the question is, do you sit there and do you bait out, wait for the cocoons to hatch and bait them out, that kind of thing? My kind of way to do that is I keep all my castings in a bin or in a bucket with holes in it, and from there I'll just put a little bit of food scraps at the top, and as my castings are waiting to go into my garden, the worms will congregate kind of in the middle. Look at that, look at all those worms. This is, for a bottom bin, this is a lot of worms. And it could be because this is the most moist bin, so they definitely like moisture. But there's not a whole lot of food in here after 197 days. I mean, I can't see any food whatsoever, but there's probably something in here. So, you know, there is no hard and fast rule for how many days until it's, you know, you need to harvest. A lot of it is, do you need the castings? But anyway, yeah, so I'll leave the castings in that bucket, and when I'm ready to use them, I just kind of pull the worms out of the way, and I feel like I've gotten most of the worms and cocoons, and I never let really big worms, if I see big worms in that my finished castings bucket, I will take them out. So there's only ever going to be babies and cocoons in there. But this, I think, gives you a good idea of, you know, whether or not these tower systems are going to be just an easy way to separate your castings. There are no easy ways, in my opinion, to effectively separate your castings 100%. I'm trying to see if I can find a red wiggler to show you the difference between the two. Sometimes you can tell with size, blue versus red wiggler, or this little orangish end of the tail. Again, I don't want to get in the way here, but I can't tell if you can see the clitellum of this one is a little bit bulged, and this one you can't even tell really where the clitellum is. But this is a red wiggler to the left, or right, I guess, for you guys. And this one is a blue worm. This one's moving slowly. This one's moving a lot faster. So there you go, if you were wondering. If you have, you have red wigglers and blue worms, easy to tell apart. If you just have a random worm and you think you know what it is, you have to count segments to the clitellum and several other characteristics. But if you know you have just two worms, typically you can figure out, two types of worms, typically you can figure out which ones are which. So let's kind of aerate this out, and I'm going to set it aside, and then this will go from a 3-tray system to a 2-tray system. And we will consider this one done, and now it's just a matter of getting the worms out. So I think we've kind of got it. And these castings are fantastic. The little specks that you see are from all the grit, all the eggshells, pulverized eggshell that's been in here, which is just fine for the garden. And if you think about it, a lot of the nutrients from the upper 2 trays have probably leaked down here, which I don't know if they can taste that or that attracts them down here. But again, kind of my point was, this is not a way to bait out worms by having a tiered system and then being able to go to the bottom. All right, so that is the bottommost tray, and I think you get a good picture of what we got here. Now I'm gonna go and look underneath this, because the big question is, okay, what happens when, or where do the worms go? Because they're all in a tray that has holes in it. So let's just look and see what is underneath this. Here we go. All right, as you can see, this is the barrier between the basin that would collect any liquid and the bottommost worm bin. And it has holes so that if there's any castings that come down here, it catches most of them, and the worms can come from this up and down. And I think this was an improvement to the system. Originally it had almost like a, I don't know, some kind of cloth synthetic barrier that could let liquid down, but it just wasn't a good thing. Now, ironically, the worms do not, right now they're trying to escape, but the worms do not get out from under here. It's pretty well sealed with this when it's on here. But the worms also, this is very moist in here, and when they stick their little heads out and they feel that dry air, they're like, this is not gonna work. So I will come in here and occasionally clean this out and get these worms back into the bin. And that's what I'm gonna do after we're done with this video. In fact, I probably haven't done it for a month and a half, so you can see they've kind of made a little bit of a home, but they can go, again, up and down through the trays. So let's go one more and look to see what's under this, and that will be the basin. So here we go. All right, so here we are at the basin, and it has been about a month and a half since I've been down here. I do not run my bins so wet that they would have liquid in here, and you have a little spout that can pour out the liquid, and that's called leachate. And some people use it on their garden, but because I don't know how long a liquid had been down here and what kind of microbes in it, I just throw it on my lawn. I don't use it for my vegetable garden. But it's not the worm tea that you would brew with a bag of worm castings and an aerator and maybe some other amendments. But anyway, these worms made it down through the last bin, made it down through that white barrier that we showed, and now they're down here, and you can see there's a little bit of castings. But for a month and a half, there's just not much that's down here. So that white plastic thing with lots of holes does a pretty good job of keeping them. Now these worms are doing fine. It's a little bit harder for them to get back up, but I'm going to clean it off and put them back in. And typically every couple, 3 weeks, I might come down here and see what's down here and maybe give it a cleaning. But that is it for the kind of the different layers of a Vermihut. You saw the 3 active trays. We're gonna harvest out of the bottom. We're gonna have 2 that are gonna be left on it. I will get these worms into the top tray and I will clean this out. And so if you're ever thinking of, using a worm tower, I think you kind of got a good picture of what's involved and how they work. So hope everybody's having a great day, and happy vermicomposting, everybody.